kept leading back to them, that the trail had gone cold forever. They were wrong. This is not a story about selling DNA kits. It's an astonishing story about how a handful of dedicated genealogists, people spending their days in spare bedrooms poring over digital databases, accomplished something extraordinary. They did what entire detective squads, armed with badges and decades of experience, could not. They pointed the finger, with unerring accuracy, at murderers who thought they had vanished into the ether. But then, one website, one simple upload, and the past started talking. And it had a lot to say. Picture Sacramento, 1976. The air is thick with the scent of turning leaves. A teenage girl walks home from a marching band competition. 3 nights later, her mother finds the back door of their home ajar, a chilling detail that unravels her world. Inside, the record player is still spinning Dreams by Fleetwood Mac, a melancholic soundtrack to a nightmare. A blood trail ends abruptly at the curb, a silent testament to a violent abduction. Detectives arrive, meticulously collecting what they can: semen, blood from under the victim's fingernails, a clear shoe print in a flower bed. They gather these fragments, hoping they'll speak. But this is 1976. CODIS, the Combined DNA Index System, won't exist for another decade. The file, heavy with unanswered questions, is placed into a cabinet labeled Stranger Homicide. That cabinet grows. It expands. Soon, it needs its own room, a desolate archive of unsolved cases. By 2010, rooms like it across the country hold more than 40 folders spanning California, Washington, Pennsylvania, Maryland, and Texas. Different crime scenes, different victims, different detectives, but always the same dead end. The DNA profiles, painstakingly preserved, sit frozen in time, like a key to a lock no one knows how to pick. Every anniversary, the victims' families call the station, only to hear a receptionist say, with weary resignation, "No new leads." It's a collective heartbreak that settles over a community, a chilling reminder that some monsters still walk free. Then, on April 24, 2018, something shifted. In a quiet California suburb, neighbors watched in disbelief as a 72-year-old grandfather, Joseph DeAngelo, was handcuffed outside his home. He was the Golden State Killer, a phantom responsible for a spree of rapes and murders that had terrorized California for decades. His arrest sent shockwaves through the law enforcement world. He was the first domino to fall in an unprecedented new way. Investigators revealed their revolutionary method. They had taken the crime scene DNA, specifically, the tiny genetic variations called SNPs that make each of us unique, and uploaded it to a public genealogy website called GEDmatch. It wasn't a crime database, it was a place where ordinary people went to find distant cousins. From the genetic connections they found, a team of genealogists meticulously built a family tree. They started with a distant relative, worked backward to a common ancestor, and then traced every branch forward until they narrowed it down to one man: DeAngelo. They then watched him, collected a discarded cup from a trash can, and confirmed the DNA match. Overnight, the world of cold case investigation was irrevocably changed. Every detective with a dusty envelope of DNA evidence suddenly wondered, could we do the same? The answer was a resounding yes. A new era of justice had dawned, ushered in by the most unexpected of allies, genealogy. Let's break this down. Imagine your DNA is a massive, 100-volume cookbook. Traditional forensics, like CODIS, is like checking the table of contents for a specific recipe title. It looks for known markers at specific locations. If it's not an exact match to a known criminal, you're out of luck. It's a powerful tool for identifying a known suspect, but not for finding an unknown one. Forensic genealogy delves much deeper. It doesn't just check the table of contents, it scans the ingredients, the margin notes from your great-grandmother, the faint coffee stain on page 47. It looks at hundreds of thousands of tiny genetic variations called SNPs. These SNPs reveal how closely related you are to someone else. Scientists convert the old crime scene DNA data into this new SNP format. They then upload this file to specialized public databases, like GEDmatch, where users can opt in to allow law enforcement searches. Algorithms scan for shared chunks of chromosomes, and a forensic genealogist, like the pioneering Cece Moore, gets a result like 114 centimorgans shared across 4 segments. To her, that translates to a probable second cousin once removed. That's her starting point. From there, it's a relentless hunt through public records, birth indexes, death certificates, marriage licenses, old high school yearbooks, newspaper obituaries, census records, and even social media pages. She builds out a family tree, working backward from the genetic match to find a common ancestor, then forward through all their descendants. She's looking for an individual who fits the criteria: age, location, a possible connection to the crime. Eventually, after weeks or months, the sprawling family tree collapses to a single person. At this point, the genealogist hands a name over to law enforcement. But they can't make an arrest yet. They need confirmatory evidence. So, they conduct surveillance, waiting for the suspect to discard something: a coffee cup, a cigarette butt, a fork. They collect it, send it to the lab, and if that sample directly matches the crime scene DNA, then they knock on the door. It's like the final piece of a massive jigsaw puzzle clicking perfectly into place, revealing the complete picture. Let's talk about Nancy Marie Benelak. On October 25, 1970, the 24-year-old newlywed was home alone after her husband left for a night shift. She microwaved popcorn, played her guitar, and wrote a letter to her mom about adopting a puppy. Sometime after midnight, the peace was shattered. A neighbor heard a scream, then silence. Police found the apartment door ajar. The forgotten popcorn was burning in the microwave. Nancy was on the carpet, brutally stabbed 29 times. Using the science of 1970, detectives collected semen and determined the killer had type O blood, a frustratingly vague clue. The case went cold for 46 years. The evidence box, a silent repository of Nancy's last moments, gathered dust as it was moved from one police station basement to another. Then came forensic genetic genealogy. In 2022, a genealogist uploaded the degraded DNA sample from Nancy's crime scene to GEDmatch. They found a second cousin in Kansas, a person completely unaware of their connection to a brutal, decades-old murder. From that single match, the genealogist began building backward to Nancy's great-grandparents, then forward through their 8 children and hundreds of descendants. They sifted through records, searching for someone who was in Sacramento in 1970. And there he was, Richard John Davis. He had died in 1997, but at the time of the murder, he had lived just 3 blocks from Nancy's apartment. He also had a misdemeanor for prowling on his record, a detail that now took on terrifying new meaning. The evidence was compelling enough for an exhumation. A DNA sample from Davis's remains was a perfect match to the semen found at Nancy's crime scene. After 52 years, Nancy's husband, now 80 and remarried, received the phone call he had long ago stopped praying for. He sobbed into the receiver, the raw grief and relief of half a century pouring out as he said the words that had haunted him: "I knew she didn't leave me." A woman brutally taken finally had her truth told, and her husband found a measure of peace. Once the playbook for forensic genetic genealogy was proven, agencies across the country rushed to copy it. The dominoes began to fall. In Kitsap County, Washington, the 1995 murder of a teenager was solved. Genealogy pointed to a Navy yeoman who used to jog the same trail where the victim was found. In Pennsylvania, the 1988 strangulation of Anna Jean Kane was closed after more than 30 years. Second cousin matches led investigators to Scott Grimm, a car salesman who had kept newspaper clippings of the crime he committed in his toolbox. In Texas, the 1985 rape murder of Terry McAdams was solved by tracking third cousins. The trail led to Bernard Sharp, who had died the same year as his victim. Investigators identified a son he had fathered, and that son's DNA provided the link that proved Sharp's guilt. And in Maryland, the 1979 stabbing of Catherine Donahue was solved when DNA from a fork, discarded by a suspect at a barbecue, identified Roger Zotas Brown 40 years after the crime. With each arrest, another phone call was made to a mother who, after decades, still kept her child's bedroom exactly as it was. These calls, once filled with apologies, now carried the weight of truth. In Washington state alone, the Attorney General's Forensic Genetic Genealogy Program has assisted in 23 investigations and solved at least 3, demonstrating the institutional embrace of this powerful tool. While the applause is deafening, it isn't unanimous. Civil liberties groups raise a valid point: if you upload your DNA to trace your family roots, should law enforcement be able to rummage through your chromosomes, potentially scrutinizing your relatives because of a distant genetic link to a crime? GEDmatch, the primary database used, initially allowed law enforcement access without explicit consent. After public outcry, they changed their policy. Now, users must actively opt in for their profiles to be searchable by police. About a third of users choose to do so. Defense attorneys argue that relying on distant matches, like third cousins who share less than 1% of their DNA, could lead to dangerous phishing expeditions and false leads that ensnare innocent people. One wrong turn in a complex family tree could have devastating consequences. Recognizing these issues, the U.S. Department of Justice issued interim policies to guide law enforcement. Genealogy must be a last resort, used only for violent crimes like homicides and rapes when all other avenues are exhausted. Crucially, any identification must be confirmed by direct DNA testing from a discarded item before an arrest can be made. The technology has outrun the law, and the debate over the line between public safety and genetic privacy is far from settled. Despite the privacy concerns, for the families of victims, the choice is often starkly simple. Kathy Clift, sister of victim Terry McAdams, puts it bluntly: privacy's important, but so is not letting a rapist die laughing at us. For every advocate raising a valid point, there's a mother who desperately wants an answer before she dies. Genealogists stress they don't need medical data, only enough genetic markers to establish familial relationships. To reassure skeptics, every conviction secured through this method has been rigorously confirmed with a direct DNA match that holds up in any courtroom. The genealogical lead is just that, a lead, not the final proof. Still, the debate rages in online forums, academic journals, and state houses. Where is the line between solving heinous crimes and the potential for genetic surveillance? For now, that line is drawn by voluntary opt-in policies and the legal requirement of a warrant after a direct DNA discard match, ensuring judicial oversight. Detective Jim Scharf, who led the charge for forensic genetic genealogy in Washington, keeps a binder filled with thank-you letters from victims' families. They are raw expressions of relief, testaments to lives transformed by answers. He recalls a letter from a woman who confessed she had slept with a baseball bat under her bed for 28 years, until genealogy caught her neighbor, the man who had terrorized her. Another came from a father who, for years, had set an extra plate at the dinner table for his lost child. He finally stopped after the arrest aired on the news. These stories reveal the relentless trauma that cold cases inflict. Scharf says the biggest change he's witnessed is the profound silence that follows a resolution. He talks about families describing the first uninterrupted night of sleep they've had in decades. Closure, he says, is an abstract word until you see someone exhale after holding their breath for 30 years. It's the silence of a nightmare finally ending, replaced by the fragile promise of peace. If you've ever uploaded your DNA, you might hold the breadcrumb that solves case number 41. Most sites now offer a clear, one-click option to toggle law enforcement matching. Do what feels right for you. But know this: somewhere, a detective is praying for a new leaf to appear on a family tree, a connection that could end decades of waiting. We can't tell every story, but their names deserve to be remembered. There's Carol Cole, from Louisiana, murdered in 1980. Her case was solved after 35 years. Mary Silvani, from Nevada, killed in 1982. Her killer was identified through genealogy and was already in prison for another crime. And Tanya Van Queilenborg and Jay Cook, a young couple murdered in Washington in 1987. Their killer was caught via a second cousin living in Canada. Each of these cases was solved with the same recipe: the unimaginable patience of families and investigators, the interconnected web of public DNA databases, and a tenacious cop willing to knock on a door 30 years after the first knock went unanswered. Forensic science is accelerating. Scientists are testing methods to predict a suspect's face from DNA alone: eye color, hair curl, even freckles. A composite sketch generated not by an artist, but by a genetic profile. Others are experimenting with protein markers that last longer than DNA, potentially pushing the cold case horizon back to the 1940s or earlier. Artificial intelligence can now scan millions of family trees in minutes, flagging the branch most likely to hide a killer and freeing up human experts for complex deductions. The next decade may bring handheld DNA sequencers to crime scenes, allowing investigators to upload data before the chalk outline even dries. This rapid evolution forces a fundamental question: how much of our genetic privacy are we willing to trade for the promise that no one gets away with murder? It's a question that will demand careful consideration as technology continues its relentless march forward. 40 cases solved. But each digit isn't just a tally mark. It's a birthday party that finally happened, a living room where the Christmas tree is no longer a memorial. Genealogy websites didn't just crack cold cases, they didn't just put monsters behind bars. They rewrote endings. They transformed endless grief into a pathway to peace. So, the next time you consider your DNA, remember that you might be the star witness in a trial that begins with the undeniable statement: your DNA says you care. Because somewhere, in a dusty box in a forgotten basement, a piece of evidence tape holds a secret. A secret that only a distant genetic echo can tell. And for the families still waiting, science is finally picking up the line. The past is speaking, and the world is finally listening. If this story resonated with you, please hit that share button. You never know who on your timeline might hold the match that solves case 42. And if you want more stories where technology meets justice, subscribe. The next chapter in this incredible saga is already loading.